An uncomfortable Lamar Jackson truth was called out. We talk about that. Early Baltimore Ravens standouts and stars from training camp and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here on this Monday, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available for you on all podcasting platforms. So in video form on YouTube, you can like and subscribe to the channel. In audio form, you can follow along and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It's the same show, both audio and video, so you're not missing out on any content any which way. We're 5 days a week on Locked On Ravens, Monday through Fridays, our regularly scheduled content at 6 a.m. Eastern time, but we do have some bonus episodes over the weekend when the headlines permit, and we did have 2 awesome bonus episodes this weekend. If you haven't checked those out, highly recommend. We talked about some big storylines that happened over the weekend. We also go live after every single Ravens game, every single piece of Ravens big news, and we also have the Locked On Ravens Squad Show, which is live Mondays and Thursdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. So is myself, Sam Njoku, and former Ravens receiver Kadri Ismail. So be sure to check us out here live later tonight. If you miss it, live on YouTube, you can obviously listen to it back, not live, in both video form and audio form. Thanks out there to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. If it's somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. And today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code Locked On NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Ravens had off yesterday for training camp. They are back today, and that is expected. They are going to be in full pads, and that's a step up. It's a step up. Talked about it this weekend, talked about it last week as well. It's a whole different ball game once the pads come on. So we're going to be diving into some big Ravens storylines throughout the show today. In the final part of the show, we'll talk about some more general ones, and Isaiah Likely contract situation update that doesn't really have to do with Likely, but a player at his position. We'll also dive into Tyreek Hill, shockingly, picking a certain quarterback over another in his rankings. In the second part of the show, we're going to be diving into some training camp stars, getting through the recent training camp updates over the weekend, just kind of touching on those again, but also really diving into who has stood out so far in the early portion of training camp. But in the first part of the show, an uncomfortable Lamar Jackson truth was called out. So I want to talk about that. And not just that, but the person who we're going to be talking about, which is Bomani Jones. He made the points. He brought up a couple of other interesting conversations just about the conversation surrounding Lamar Jackson, obviously it being his age 28 season, year 8 in the NFL. There's a lot of different points that are being made about Lamar right now, and Bomani called out some of those and talked about them in the context of where he believes Lamar is right now. So Bomani made these points over on The Right Time with Bomani Jones and talked a lot. So apparently what I can gather is they are doing, or Bomani is doing, a top 25 player list, NFL player list. And he's going 25 through 1. And his number 17 player is Lamar Jackson. And so he said that it honestly felt a little high. Like when he was going through it, he said he could have maybe put Drew Brees there because of the Super Bowl and all this. But, you know, he was kind of tugging with it a little bit about, oh, is it too high? Is it not? But I think he feels confident at the end of the day with where he put him. At least that's what I could gather. But what Bomani Jones said here that I think is just kind of a mic drop moment, and I really wanted to highlight at least one of the points from Bomani I wanted to highlight on the show today. He said, quote, Lamar Jackson is a 2-time NFL MVP. The only reason he's not a 3-time MVP is because the writers wanted to be nice to Josh Allen. That's the only reasonable explanation for how it is that Lamar Jackson can be a first-team All-Pro and Josh Allen win the MVP, and they play the same position. We all saw this as it happened. It was the participation-type trophy thing. Like, everyone deserves to win now and then. And then he talked about how it's Employee of the Month, and you can't give the Employee of the Month the same guy over and over again. You got to switch it up at times. And this, to me, is the mic drop moment here from Bomani Jones of, like, yeah, despite the fact that Josh Allen had an incredible season, it's not me trying to discount Josh, but it's me trying to just look at what Lamar Jackson did last season in the context of not only his statistical achievements, because Josh obviously had some of those as well, but also the fact of the schedule that he played, DVOA, some of the advanced stuff. Like, there's a lot that went in Lamar's favor, and you do see the writers give Lamar first team All-Pro and Josh the MVP. And I'm not going to harp too much on that conversation. We're pretty well past that at this point. But Bomani bringing this up, it kind of speaks to the greatness of Lamar Jackson. And that was more where Bomani was going with this. He said, quote, take a player who's won 3-time MVPs. He was counting this year that he didn't win, but just in the context of it, take a player who's won 3-time MVPs and a Heisman Trophy and being a truly redefining player about what it is to be a quarterback in the NFL. He is here. And this list from Bomani apparently values peak over longevity. And Lamar Jackson at his peak, obviously, he has gotten better each and every single season. While the stats have fluctuated, that's obviously natural in the sports world. If you get better every year, statistically, you're going to have some pretty unrealistic stats. But the way that Lamar Jackson has flipped the league on its head, in my opinion, and has, I agree, redefining is a very good word to use here. Lamar has redefined what it means to be a quarterback, and I think that is why some people don't like him, which I personally think is ridiculous. But he has shown that there is another way to play the quarterback position that is extremely efficient, and it's not like Lamar is the first dual-threat quarterback ever. I'm not trying to say that, because there obviously were those before him, and those guys obviously all had influence, whether, it be, Michael Vick is obviously the one that Lamar gets compared to the most, but there are obviously others. But to me, this conversation goes with a bunch of, you see it all the time in sports with awards or with really good players, is fatigue is a part, whether it's of the awards process or the conversation process. Look, I'm a Denver Nuggets guy, and I saw it happen with Nikola Jokic, all-time great player. They gave Joel Embiid the MVP after Jokic won 2, when Jokic probably didn't deserve to win it the year prior, and then he lost out on it to Embiid the year he deserved to win it. People argue that last season, or 2 years ago, I guess, Lamar Jackson, it should have been Dak Prescott or Josh Allen. And I still, look, Lamar's season from like an MVP standard, sure, was it the best MVP season of all time? No, it wasn't. But Josh Allen had the turnover situation. The Ravens as a team were the most dominant team, and then we're factoring in seeding. So again, the whole 9 yards there, it's a different conversation that I want to more so focus on the fact that these are not the conversations Lamar Jackson is in. And I'm not going to count the MVP from this season for Lamar because Lamar didn't win it. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to count it for him because he didn't win it. But Bomani talked about the fact that he believes Lamar is going to make the Hall of Fame, which is not a very hot take. But he also talked about the fact that he is a very good pocket passer. He's going to make the Hall of Fame. He said, quote, I don't think he's a Hall of Famer necessarily right now at this moment, but 2-time MVP, 3-time All-Pro first-team quarterback. I feel pretty confident that he's going to go to the Hall of Fame. Hall of Fame quarterbacks that didn't make it to the Super Bowl in the Super Bowl era, that's a really short list. He mentioned Dan Fouts and Warren Moon as those guys. And then to round it off, he said, he's still crazy young, and if you have the accolades that he has, then yeah, you're that guy. And I don't think we talk about him in those historic terms because we're still asking the questions about the Ravens team success on his watch. However, he's earned the praise he's getting from this list. And that's another truth, I think, for Lamar Jackson, where I don't think it's necessarily one that's fair to Lamar, but I think that is the conversation of why Lamar's not being talked about as a historic player, because one, he hasn't made it to the Super Bowl, and two, the Ravens playoff collapses have been so epic. And as the quarterback, you're going to shoulder a lot more of the blame for that. Is it all deserved? Does Lamar deserve to shoulder all that blame? Absolutely not, right? Some of it is on the coaches. Some of it's on his defense. Some of it's on his pass catchers. It's a team sport for a reason. But at the end of the day, that to me, it's like that is staining Lamar's legacy right now. And it to me, like, yes, Lamar needs to be better in the postseason in moments, but he also has had dominant postseason showings in certain games. And it's, again, the goalpost being moved for a player of Lamar's caliber and of Lamar's talent. And, something Bomani also talked about is, in terms of receiving him and, how people interpret Lamar and feel about Lamar, he said it's somewhat difficult to separate anything that happens to him in the NFL from how he wound up getting to the NFL. He mentioned all the things about, the receiver stuff at the combine and this, that, and the other, not running the 40, that's all stuff Bomani talked about. And there are a lot of other uncomfortable truths within that, we have certainly heard about and have been talked about and have a lot of merit. But, at the end of the day, I think that Lamar Jackson is a player that is exceeding, everything that some people thought he could be. I mean, some people obviously, and I thought Lamar Jackson, at the peak of his powers, was going to be an absolutely incredible Hall of Fame potential quarterback. So it's not necessarily overly surprising to me Lamar Jackson is doing this and has been as good as he has been. I was all in on Lamar Jackson. But for those guys and people that did not believe in Lamar Jackson, he is so clearly elevated himself past all of that, and people still find ways to tear him down. And it does add on to his story here. So the next step for Lamar is a Super Bowl. And Bomani talked about that with his list about, all right, well, quarterbacks who make the Hall of Fame, there aren't a lot of them that didn't make it to the Super Bowl in the Super Bowl era. And I think Lamar will make it. I think Lamar will win it, right? That, to me, it's going to come eventually. Peyton Manning won his first Super Bowl when he was 30 years old. Michael Jordan won his first championship when he was 28 years old. So the all-time greats sometimes, and this is something we've talked about all the time here on Locked On Ravens, it doesn't always happen where a guy wins a Super Bowl in the first 3 to 4 years of his career. Sometimes it takes more time. That does not take away who they are as a player, but I think everybody here knows Lamar Jackson, the next step for him, and really the thing he has to do is get to and win the Super Bowl. But Bomani calling out the whole favoriting Josh Allen and being nice to Josh Allen and really just straight up saying it. I got to give Bomani a lot of credit for that, because I think that a lot of people have kind of been, this, that, and the other, this, that, this is the reason why Josh won. That's the reason. I mean, I think we can all be honest about it. And I think people just got tired of voting for Lamar, and that to me is the ultimate compliment, if we're being honest, right? When you tire out voters and tire out people so much from your greatness that they want to vote for somebody else, I mean, it kind of hurts you in the accolades department, but it shows just how great you are as a player. So coming up in the second part of the show, we'll talk about Ravens training camp. We'll get into some stars and standouts of the first week. So stay tuned, plenty to dive into on Locked On Ravens. This show is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. Fantasy football's back. Fire up the group chat, get your draft board ready, and buckle up for a season filled with breakouts, busts, and all the overreactions we live for. It's all going down on Yahoo Fantasy. This year, me and Locked On Ravens are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. I've used Yahoo Fantasy for years and love how smooth the draft day experience is, from the draft board to player analysis that gets you ready for your big day on draft day. Yahoo Fantasy truly does have it all. And to celebrate 28 years of fantasy greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days, giving you more ways to play, more ways to draft, and more ways to win. It all begins August 4th. Stay tuned to get started by creating or joining Yahoo Fantasy Football League, yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. That is yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. And let's make this fantasy season the best one yet. Back on Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher here with you still on this Monday edition of the show. Man, we're getting really close to just checking off more and more boxes. The Ravens Stadium practice is coming up this Sunday on August 3rd, so really pumped for that. We'll have a live reaction after the stadium practice to really go in detail about what was seen there, and we can all kind of react to it right there. Obviously, the Ravens will have some joint practices, and then their first preseason game, that is August 7th, and I have some really exciting news and announcements for that, which I'm really pumped about, trying to get all the logistics in order. So if all that goes well, planning on doing something great for this season. But let's get into training camp. The Ravens obviously kicked off on Wednesday. Vets reported on Tuesday, and they've had 4 days of practice so far: Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. We talked about some of the Friday and Saturday updates on our bonus episodes over the weekend. So if you want a more in-detailed look at what happened over the weekend at training camp, be sure you go check out those episodes, and also the headlines. We talked about the Steelers signing more Ravens players and bringing in more former Ravens guys that, coming the Pittsburgh Ravens over there. And then we also talked about Todd Monken getting brutally honest on Keaton Mitchell, along with those training camp updates. But I just want to go look at the stars, right? I think the stars are really important to single out here early. Again, the pads are expected to come on today, and that's a whole different ballgame, as I talked about at the top of the show. But you can still take away some stuff without the pads coming on. So I'm just going to go position by position here and just dive into some people that I've been impressed with what I've been hearing about, and, really the biggest winners, in my opinion, of the early training camp portion for Baltimore. I think Lamar Jackson is certainly one of them. First day of practice apparently was solid, if not unspectacular for Lamar, but he ended up stringing together a couple of nice practices. The defense seems to be more ahead of the offense at this point, but former Ravens receiver Qadri Ismail and I did talk about the fact that is pretty normal for training camps as the offense catches up and, you start to see a little bit more once the pads come on there. But Lamar apparently, he's been pretty solid overall, all things considered, which, again, it's Lamar Jackson. I'm not expecting anything less there, but good for Lamar and good for the Ravens for, kicking things off on a high note in that regard. Apparently, Keaton Mitchell looks good, looks fast. I think that he's been a standout so far. Apparently has 1 or 2 good plays a day, which is really awesome to hear about. Again, with the running backs, not as easy to take away things without the pads being able to come on, but you still like what you hear about Keaton. Wide receiver-wise, there are a laundry list of names here. I think Zay Flowers, from everything that we've heard, has looked awesome. The shiftiness is there, cutting ability. DeAndre Hopkins and Lamar Jackson continue to establish chemistry, which I think is really, really big. And he had a great day on Saturday. He was making diving catches, coming back for the ball, high-effort plays, contested, everything that I think the Ravens envisioned for DeAndre as their number 3 receiver. I think he's showing it so far throughout training camp. Someone who I think can maybe, in a best-case scenario, push DeAndre Hopkins for the number 3 receiver spot, although I don't think it's very likely. I think he'll probably stick right in as the number 4 receiver. That is Tez Walker. Tez has been really good. He's been kind of knocking on the door, apparently, and really broke through in a big way during Saturday's practice with a banner day for Tez Walker. So that's a guy that we know dominated during spring practices at OTAs and mini camp and has carried that over. And again, I said this on yesterday's bonus episode. I am not going to sit here and crown Tez Walker because, he has done this well in practice. We've had plenty of Ravens training camp stars at this receiver. Actually, I think we should officially come up with a name. What is the Ravens standout training camp award? Who is it named after? Is it James Prochet? Is it Jeremy Butler? Is it Miles Boykin? In the comments, if you are on YouTube, or you can message it to me if you're listening in audio form, who do you think we should name that award after? I want to name it after somebody, and we'll have it be the Locked On Ravens training camp award or James Prochet training camp award, for example. I think my money might be on James Prochet right now, for being honest, but any other submissions, be sure to put those in the comments. So long story short, I think that for Tez, he's a guy that can make an impact. And some of the traits, again, contested catch guy, he can use his speed really effectively. I think if he can develop a little bit more of an NFL route tree, and it's there. I'm not saying it's not, but I'm just saying in-game situations, showing that off a little bit more. I think the Ravens have something here. Now, he has to prove it in those game situations, but we saw glimpses of it last year, that Giants game where he broke open. He had moments. Can he build on that? We will see how that all unfolds. I think also, Tyson Williams, another guy who we could consider for that training camp / preseason, all, training camp award. But I digress. Other than that, tight end position wise, I guess not necessarily a ton of this guy had a breakout day, but apparently all 3 tight ends have looked really good. So, you like to hear that. I don't necessarily think it's been the star. I guess Isaiah Likely, he had back-to-back days with one-handed catches, so there's that. Maybe a little in the flash department, which is nice if you're looking for flashiness. But, yeah, tight end's looking solid. I think it's the best tight end room in the league. So, I think that's really good for him. Offensive line, again, I think we'll know more once the pads come on. You can't take too much away. The offensive line, you're not getting uber physical right now without the pads on. So really in the trenches, running back, inside line. Well, I guess coverage wise, inside linebackers, but you're not really boom, going in there and just completely blowing up somebody in the backfield, for example. That's not happening with the full force of pads. Like, we've heard Roquan Smith has gotten stuffs on Derrick Henry, and that has happened without pads coming on. But I want to see it with the contact, with the physicality. So offensive line-wise, that to me is where I'm looking for the Ravens, especially once the pads apparently are coming on today. So we'll see how that all unfolds. But coming up in the final part of the show, we'll round out the Ravens training camp stars by looking at the defensive side of the ball, as well as talk about the latest on Isaiah Likely's contract situation, more so along the lines of how the tight end market is developing. We'll get into Tyreek Hill again, shockingly naming Lamar Jackson over a quarterback, and a lot more coming up on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Gametime. We've all been there logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime, and you can save up to 60% with their killer last-minute deals. And if you've ever wondered what your view will actually look like before you buy, the app shows you a panoramic seat view, so there are absolutely no surprises. And with Gametime, the price you see is the price you pay. There are no hidden fees, and if you're worried about what happens if plans change, the Gametime guarantee has your back with cancellation, protection, and more. So take the guesswork out of buying concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. We return at Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still rocking out with you here on this Monday edition of the show. Be sure to catch us live here tonight on the Locked On Ravens YouTube channel, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time for the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. Myself, Sam Njoku, and former Ravens receiver Kadri Ismail. We have hour-long shows every Monday and Thursday talking Ravens football, the latest headlines, latest storylines. First episode of that kicked off a couple of weeks ago in addition to the regularly scheduled Locked On Ravens show, which is, of course, Monday through Friday. And it's been really fun. So if you can tune in live, that's great. If you can't, that's also great because you can listen or watch in video form or audio form after it is all over. But let's now finish out our conversation about the Ravens training camp stars and move over to defense here before getting into some of the general Ravens news and notes in the final part of the final segment here. On the defensive line, we've heard a lot of great things so far about a couple of different players. Again, it's in the trenches, it's hard, right? I talked about that with the offensive line. It's the same thing on the defensive line, but, you know, you're hearing good things about what Odafe Owe is doing without the pads on there. Would have had a couple of sacks. Aeneas Peoples is a rookie. He's had a couple of nice plays. So, again, once we see the pads come on, we'll have more to talk about there. But there is still some stuff like we haven't heard Mike Green's name a ton. That's not about Mike Green. It's about the fact that he can't necessarily showcase his stuff without pads being on there and having that physicality element to him. And it's the same thing with the offensive line. So just want to reiterate that again. Then you have the inside linebackers. Teddy Buchanan's made a couple of nice plays, but I think the star here is Roquan Smith, who looks to be in shape. I know that was a big thing for him last offseason, and he had to kind of work his way and play his way into shape last year. He looks good, apparently. He has been, on top of things and has made nice plays. Like, I think it's a good start for Roquan. We know the player that Roquan Smith is, how good he is when he's at the peak of his powers and everything is going right for him. So it's been nice to hear that Roquan is there with Teddy Buchanan, and he's had a nice couple of plays, right? That's the battle, though. Like, it's Teddy Buchanan and Trenton Simpson. That's the battle. Simpson had an interception on a tipped ball from Lamar Jackson, or I think it was Lamar. It might have been Cooper Rush, but it was one of the two. It was a tipped interception that fell into Trenton's hands. Like, that, to me, is one of the big battles to watch, especially as pads come on. But I think the name of the game defensively for the Ravens has been in the secondary. Jaire Alexander has been shut down, given the seatbelt, strap him in. That celebration is already catching on. Jaire has been awesome. And, the energy, multiple Ravens players and coaches have talked about that. He brings the Ravens defense already had swagger. Jaire brings a whole nother level of that. And I think all the players are buying into what Jaire brings to the table there. Plus, he's still really good. He's still a top 10 corner in the league, in my opinion, which is, I can't believe he's in Baltimore, for being honest. Nate Wiggins has also had a really strong camp. Seems like he has been really good and been making plays. He and Jaire did a joint seatbelt celebration, which got all of, Ravens social media in a frenzy, because I think that's something we could see for sure. So those two have made headlines, but then you have like an undrafted guy, Ruben Lowry, undrafted rookie who has been making a name for himself. He's been all around the ball. He could be someone that makes the roster over maybe one of the two corners the Ravens drafted. We'll see. But if the guy keeps balling out like he has and he has a good preseason, well, you might just have to keep him on the roster if you are Baltimore. Jalen Davis has apparently been around the ball a lot. Bill Bradis and UC Kane have made plays. So, you really like what you're hearing there. PJ Tampa's been involved, which has been nice. And, Malaki Starks, really has been a standout. He had a really good day. I think day 2 was his big day of training camp. That was where Malaki really shined. But, he seems ready. He feels ready. He's gotten a ton of praise from the players and the coaches. That, to me, has been one of the best storylines to hear about. And then Tyler Loop, who is absolutely perfect so far in training camp, obviously had a tough go of it towards the end of spring practices. I mean, he's been as good as he can be. And I know they haven't kicked a ton of like quote unquote real field goals. A lot of the makes and the kicks have been from 40 and in, but he had a 63-yarder. Apparently he had a 68-yarder a little bit later on Thursday. So, that to me is really good. Or maybe it was Friday. Yeah, I think it was Friday. Yeah, Friday it was that Loop had 10 for 10 after John Hoyland, who's another guy that's been playing really well. He hasn't been perfect. He's missed 2 kicks, but he went 9 of 9 on Thursday. Tyler Loop did the Usher watch this, and he had 10 for 10 on Friday, and then he went 7 of 7 on Saturday. So, he's been balling out too. Big shoes to fill for Justin Tucker, obviously leaving and on the field his legacy. But Loop, right now at least, is showing that he can handle it. Now, again, there's one thing between like doing it in training camp with no pressure and doing it in a huge game on the road to win the game down 2. Different situations, but, he's doing what he can right now. He's working on things, and, I have high hopes for Tyler Loop. Hopefully he can fill those shoes. So we'll see what training camp practice brings this week. A lot of new opportunities, and I'm excited to break it all down. We'll have all the training camp updates for you every single day here on Locked On Ravens. But another storyline here to talk about for the Ravens, Isaiah Likely and the Ravens contract negotiations probably just got even more difficult as the Dallas Cowboys, they signed Jake Ferguson, their tight end, to a 4-year deal worth $52 million in new money, with $30 million of that in total guaranteed money. He also got a $12 million signing bonus. For Jake Ferguson, $13 million, that puts him right at the top or near the top. It's not exactly at the top, but you have him right in between Cole Kmet and David Njoku as the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's the 7th highest paid tight end in the league currently as it stands. With that new extension with new money, I know it's new money, so it's a little bit, interesting just to see how the full contract will end up playing out for him. But I'm just talking average annual value of the new money extension. $13 million would put him at 7th among tight ends right now. So for Isaiah Likely, is he going to now ask for Mark Andrews money at $14 million? Could he ask for 15 to surpass Mark Andrews? TJ Hawkinson is next after Andrews at 16.5. I'm not sure Likely gets that number, but the longer that the Ravens wait with these extensions, the more money they are going to lose if these guys are trying to beat out the new extensions. And Likely's not going to get top of market, but he certainly is going to get a hefty raise. And Tyreek Hill also, he shockingly picked Lamar, maybe not so shockingly, but I guess since he played with Patrick Mahomes, it's a little shocking. He picked Patrick Mahomes versus Lamar Jackson, and he went with Lamar Jackson. He had to pick between the two. He went with Lamar, and I know that it was really tough for him. You could see him kind of agonizing over it, but I think Ravens would have picked up on that. Chiefs would have picked up on that. So, hey, Lamar Jackson continues to get that recognition. We talked about that in the first part of the show with him being the player that he is, the accolades that he has, and the great player that he has turned into. Man, there are a lot of conversations that Lamar Jackson is already in and that he can potentially be in if he gets to or wins the Super Bowl. That's all I have for you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. We'll be back here later tonight, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, live on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show with myself, Sam Njoku, and Kadri Ismail for an hour. So be sure you tune in for that. And, of course, we'll be back here on the regular Locked On Ravens show tomorrow, breaking down all the training camp updates and so much more. So be sure on the way out, hit the like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along in audio form. I want to see you right back here later tonight on Locked On Ravens.